Okay, welcome back everyone. Our next speakers are Chik and Jeffery Cruz. Sally works at the University of Sydney Library. She has a Bachelor of Creative Arts Honours and a Master of Information Studies. She's had her work published in Real Knowledge Management as well as numerous poetry publications. Jeffery has worked in academic, public and special libraries in the United States, Spain and Australia. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Hispanic Language and Literature and a Master's in Spanish and a Master's in Information Resources and Library Science. He became Associate Director at the University of Sydney Library in 2016. And the title of Sally's and Jeffrey's presentation today is The Times They Are for Upskilling, Design Thinking as a Framework for Service Improvement Initiatives. Please welcome Sally and Jeffery.
Thank you very much. Before we begin today, I'd like to acknowledge the tradition of custodianship and law of the country on which the University of Sydney's campuses stand. We pay our respect to those who have cared and continue to care for country. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. The times they are for upskilling, design thinking as a framework for service improvement initiatives. I'm Chik, Assistant Manager of Student Experience, and this is Jeff Cruz, Associate Director, Site Services, and we're from the University of Sydney. To define design thinking, I borrow from IDEO, and it's a process for creative problem solving, utilizing empathy and experimentation to arrive at innovative solutions. The 5 design thinking principles are empathise, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We took 3 approaches to service improvement with design thinking, which we'll share with you today. This is about sharing our journey and stories. We define the leader-led approach as someone with leadership, engaging in design thinking with an expert as a consultant. The train-the-trainer approach is where someone shares design thinking as a framework with staff with the view that they may become practitioners in the future. And the frontline staff approach is where staff use design thinking as part of their work processes to take ideas forward, to start something new. The first 2 approaches are more top-down, though with the train-the-trainer approach, we're taking the perspective that anyone could be an expert. And the last approach is grassroots, bottom-up. Here we have skills that are passed on from a project level to an engagement team, and then from a frontline staff members to the wider library. I'll hand it over to Jeff for the next part.
Thanks, Sally. Our first case study, the Staff Visibility Project, is what Sally and I call a leader-led approach to using design thinking. Because, well, a leader, me, decided that we would use design thinking to help us solve a complex problem. We did this by bringing in a UX consultant who just happened to be the assistant manager of student experience at the time and a UX designer to boot to lead our workshops. In 2019, the associate director of site services was convinced that we had a staff visibility problem in the library. In 2017, through a series of divisional-wide workshops, site services had developed client experience standards that included a focus on being visible and identifiable in our spaces. However, a 2018 evaluation of our frontline services model highlighted that students were still unsure where to go for help. So I immediately went into problem-solving mode. Based on the success of the bright red library t-shirts worn by all frontline staff during the 2 weeks of orientation, I thought, aha, to solve the complex problem of why don't students know where to go for help in the library, what we need is a fully branded uniform for all frontline staff year-round. That, however, did not prove popular with staff, but it was also attempting to solve a complex problem without understanding the why or the how students get help from library staff. So I took a step back and worked with the assistant manager student experience to put together a 14-person staff visibility group made up of frontline staff at all levels. Our goal was to use design thinking principles alongside user research to empathize and understand how students get help from the library and ideate and prototype ways of improving the issue of findability. Over 3 workshops, Heidi walked us through how to empathize with our customer. Remember, we were so focused on uniforms and how unpopular staff thought they were. We really needed to focus on how students are or aren't able to find help from a staff member when they need it. In fact, we spent an entire 2-hour workshop just defining what the user problem was so that we could define our user research questions. Heidi took us through how to use contextual interviews, which are one-on-one interviews conducted in the workspace to observe how the user uses the service, to better understand our clients in situ. A small team of 5 staff partnered up and, armed with an interview guide, a clipboard, and a pencil, held 69 one-on-one interviews with clients in different library spaces to understand how they get help when they need it. In our final workshop, we used affinity diagramming, where we hand wrote each piece of contextual inquiry data that referred to how clients do or would get help. We wrote these 232 data points onto individual Post-it notes, each color-coded by library location. As part of affinity mapping, the team grouped the Post-it notes into themes that surfaced the why and how students engage with library staff. And you know what we found? That the majority of clients knew how to get help from staff when they need it. In fact, they rated the ease of finding help as 8.9 out of 10. Interesting, what we did find out is that many clients didn't know we had an online chat service, which we'd had in place since before 2016. In addition to getting help online, they also said they wanted to use technology to get help. And while the majority of clients know where to go for help in the library, what they didn't know is what kind of help library staff could offer or when exactly staff are available. And what do we do with this information? Well, as you probably know, in March 2020, COVID hit and we closed all of our in-person services, including our information desks. So we threw out the idea of uniforms. Second, our library digital service team did an overhaul of our live chat service to make it more visible by embedding it in each library webpage. This was timely, as now all of our information and customer services were through live chat. We also trialed new COVID-safe services. We installed a virtual information desk where clients can video chat with library staff through a huge touchscreen monitor when no staff are physically in the library. For our second case study, the exam-ready program planning, we call it a train the trainer approach because this time I was leading the design thinking workshops based on what I had learned through Heidi and other professional development. And by using design thinking principles, I was able to share my own knowledge and tools with other staff so that they could use it in their work. So case study number 2 starts with the great portfolio shuffle of 2021, where the client engagement team moved into my area. With Heidi leaving to take on a great opportunity as an experienced design specialist in the library, I was left with a new portfolio smack dab in the middle of planning for our exam-ready suite of programs, our second biggest suite of events outside of orientation. To be honest, I didn't know where to start. I had a group of client engagement and student experience advisors looking for a direction, particularly as student engagement was constantly shifting in the time of COVID. Of course, we could always just reuse the programming we used last semester, but I was adamant that we had the opportunity to do some new and innovative programming that would meet the needs of students continuing to do their exams during COVID. So we held a design thinking workshop specifically for Exam Ready for the sole purpose of developing 10 feasible activities that would meet our clients' needs during exams. Realistically, I was looking for a relatively quick and easy way to find a new and innovative activity. Since we didn't have any undergraduate students on our team, we spent quite a bit of time empathizing with our clients. To do this, we led game-storming games to get us into the mindset of undergraduate students and out of our library shoes. Next, we spend time defining the problems students actually have during exam time that the library can help solve. Once we had over 20 user need statements, we moved to ideation, which is a fancy word for brainstorming. We used the 3-12-3 brainstorming method, which allows for many great ideas to be generated quickly. Finally, we turned to prototyping, where participants randomly took one of the user need statements and chose one of the great ideas attached to it from the brainstorming session and created one feasible activity using our standard event brief we normally use for creating events. And what was the final outcomes from using design thinking? Well, there were some fantastic event ideas that just didn't have the time and resources for. The prototyped ideas that did get off the ground were iterative, meaning they built on some of the events we were already running or using them in a different context. For example, we expanded our popular exam-ready study planner to include both a downloadable version and a print version that we made available at information desks and included in our exam-ready care packs. We also borrowed from our previously successful Plan Your Semester Zoom workshop to help students plan their exam online. We also committed to running more in-semester activities outside of orientation and exams, and partnered with the university's vStudy Connect service to get overseas students connected with each other through online library activities. One of the best outcomes, however, was that some of the participants wanted to run their own design thinking workshops, borrowing from the slides and the activities as inspiration from the sessions we ran.
And I have the next part of the story. The third part of our case study is that the frontline staff approach is where library staff technicians use design thinking to take their ideas forward to start something new. Starts with an idea, but it's with a view to create and improve. Mid-June this year, my colleague Valentina had been inspired from the client engagement workshop process run by Jeff. The issue of Zoom fatigue loomed. We were both in the staff learning and development group, which develops an internal library staff conference called Show and Tell in July. Since there's many presentations, we schedule a break where there's something fun to engage library staff, and we've had a cooking show before. But this time, Valentina put on a wonderful divergent thinking workshop to share her passion for design thinking and also to battle Zoom fatigue from back-to-back presentations. Staff were asked to post their response on an online platform. The prompt was, if the dream library were a sandwich, it would be. And this is the design thinking technique of picturing the library as a sandwich. To get us thinking about the library's future in a new way, we were again recast as chefs and again out of our library shoes. It took the hierarchy out of sharing ideas as the platform didn't require anything other than the idea, and ideas of all kinds were welcomed. An example of us questioning assumptions of what makes a library were the sandwiches made entirely without bread, with cheese or even pixels, an entirely digital offering. The workshop showed how divergent thinking is a way to engage staff and reflect on client services. Staff feedback for the event particularly noted that Valentina's session was inventive, interactive, and helped bring balance to the entire program. Each use of design thinking in site services and beyond develops the community of practice, and it upskills staff in frontline roles to take the lead. While we're not quite yet at the part where design thinking is part of the DNA of our library culture, it's a place we're heading towards, a community of practice where design thinking inspires staff to share their ideas about moving forward to the whole library. The impacts of our research is that we have noticed an increased efficiency in changing environments. There's often the well-meaning intention to do it well and get it right, but design thinking with its ideation freed us to do things on the fly. It assisted with finding consensus on improving client experiences. Design thinking framework helped define the problem and address assumptions. This reframed the issue of staff visibility and brought staff together to come up with a solution. It also empowered staff working in frontline roles to innovate, coming up with new ways of developing events, and even more, sharing skills with the whole library. And then it upskilled all staff involved to improve client services, from the leadership team to our frontline team. This really is all about the upskilling. At the start of these stories, we have one design thinking expert, and through his workshops, self-study, and applying design thinking skills, we have staff members who have become experts by their passion and practice of design thinking. You could be the next design thinking expert. Jeff and I wanted to share our stories to show different approaches and perspectives, which are somehow connected and part of a bigger picture. In sharing these stories, there are positive outcomes for both clients and staff. And yes, it didn't always work as expected. However, we have a better understanding of the issues faced by our clients, a framework that we can use for service improvement initiatives, and we're developing a community of practice of design thinking. I just want to take a quick moment to thank all of my friends and colleagues who have contributed to our stories today. Heidi, Frontline, and the Visibility Group, the Client Engagement Group, and Valentina as our Client Engagement Advisor. Do we have any questions? And we also have our emails if you'd like to get in touch with us.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sally and Jeffrey. Sounds like you've got some really innovative ideas there. And I love how you're using both the top-down and the bottom-up approach. I'm wondering what is the engagement from staff? How much buy-in do you get from them? Have you had any resistance?
can take that one if that's all right, Sally.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the reasons we use design thinking is to kind of move away from that idea of resistance. So from the staff, for example, the staff visibility case study, it was going to be a very top-down, decision to let's go to uniforms. But we use design thinking to actually think, well, what is the problem that we have and what is the best way to address it? So we actually did quite a lot of user research to actually find out why don't students know where to go, and does it depend on where they are in the library? And it turned out students needed more help online and actually less help in person. So we had to actually flip what we had planned on its head and really focus on the online help that we were providing rather than the in-person help we were providing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. There's no other questions at the moment, so we'll take a short break before coming back with the last speaker.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.